Let's see. Maddie's gonna flex about his Peloton. What is this segment called? What should we call it if we do a stream clip of this? Maddie flexes his Peloton and also talks about Hellblade. I don't know. I want to get into the Peloton. I just don't get it. Like, again, it's like it's a $500 bike with a $2,000 screen on it, and then they make you also sign up for like a $35 a month subscription. Like, I can't get there. And again, I love wasting money, and even I can't get that. So I feel like I'm missing something. Maybe there's something that makes it really good that I just don't know about. So I feel like I need somebody who's in the cult to explain it to me. Like, you know, if somebody's really into Scientology, I just need somebody in it to be like, oh no, it's really good because you get to give Tom Cruise back rubs or something. I just need somebody to give me that extra thing, you know, just little something.
I was watching Mad Max Fury Road on my Peloton, and I don't know why, because I had a subscription active, but they stopped for ads every like 25 minutes.
Dude, I would riot. You have a subscription to Peloton and they're still interrupting your stuff to play ads. Sorry, I'm getting triggered for you, Maddie. I'm sorry.
I did get hit with a Hellblade 2 ad.
What?
I know, right? I was
They exist?
Yeah. I was actually surprised that I was stunned because I was like, no way. This is actually a thing. I was like, okay, good. You know, a nice Max partnership. Good.
Wow.
But that is the first visual promotion I have seen, because I am where I think many others are, which is I'm a little worried for Hellblade 2. It doesn't match where Xbox is marching toward. This is not a major IP. I think it looks like one. It definitely has the PlayStation third person over the shoulder energy. It's got that AAA look and feel. Hopefully it delivers on a quality front and whatnot. But I mean, this is a game that I feel is mighty quiet for, I mean, when this is the game it's backwards. You announce it alongside your Xbox and now you're here. It's like, this is one of your big investments. If you look back at the showcase where Xbox announced the acquisitions, the loudest cheers were for Ninja Theory.
I agree. It doesn't really fit the vibe. Now you guys are saying you're triggered because I'm saying Peloton weird. I don't care. I'm gonna keep triggering you. Farm that engagement, boys. No, I mean, it is true that this does not jive with the Xbox strategy, which is to get more hours to like hooked on their Game Pass platform. Because again, with any platform, with any business, you have to look at what are called KPIs, right? The key performance indicators. On YouTube, for example, for my job, I'm looking at watch times, I'm looking at click-through rates, and I'm looking at like subscriber participation. So what videos are causing people to subscribe, what videos are making people return who maybe are not subscribed, but they're coming back and maybe each time they're more likely to subscribe. All of that matters. Watch time matters because it tells me, okay, if this video is good, they're going to watch the whole thing. If it's bad, they're probably clicking off quick. And you can see when they click off in the video. So what was going on screen when that happened that made them click off? Was it that I was trying to tell a story that just didn't connect? Was it that I was we tried to do a bit for the memes that didn't really connect in some way? Like, we just got to figure out what it is and we can quantify it. With Game Pass, it seems that their KPIs are gameplay time, and then of course like user acquisition. How many people are signing up for Game Pass subscriptions and booting X game up first? And you could track that by saying, okay, new signups, what's the first game they're installing and playing? Okay, oh, they're signing up and then they install Starfield. Okay, we need to double down on games like Starfield because that's bringing people to the platform. So there's all sorts of stats that you can look at that can drive the success of your business. And the other stuff's important, you know, total games offered, maybe total downloads. That stuff's good to have. But for most businesses, there's a few key performance indicators that you can track that will tell you how the rest of everything's going to follow. Like if this number is good and this number is good, everything else will be good. That's usually what you're looking at. And with Game Pass, we know that they pay out based on hours played. That's at least the last time it was revealed by somebody. To my knowledge, they were being, like, the studio and publisher were being compensated based on the hours that their game was played. So if they had a 100-hour game, but people were only playing 30 minutes of it, they would make less money than the people that had like a 2-hour game, but people were playing it all the way through because it was total hours spent playing that you would get compensated for. So for something like Hellblade, it only really makes sense with their broader business plan and for tracking KPIs and stuff if it either drives a ton of new signups to Game Pass, which I don't really think it will unless it reviews phenomenally well. Then maybe you get some people coming over from PlayStation or something to try it. Even then, I'm not really sure because a lot of people are expecting it probably comes to PS5 later anyways. But beyond that, they want to see, okay, are people playing the whole game through? Once they start it, are they getting all the way through it? Whether it's an hour long when it comes out or if it's the full 8 that the game director mentioned, whatever it is, are they playing it all the way through? Those are the stats that are going to matter. But even then, I don't think it's going to be as good for Game Pass as like a Starfield, which even if people generally are not super stoked on it, they're still putting in dozens of hours. Maybe they put in 25, 35, 45 hours. They play through the whole thing and they're left like, at the end of it. That for them is still good because that was 45 hours you spent playing this game on their platform, and that's a win for them. Even if you didn't love it at the end of the day, you still were on their platform during that time. Swordfish Master on Twitch says, I think Xbox acquired Ninja Theory early when they wanted more prestige titles, but now they have figured out that hour played is more important. That's perhaps true, but you also have to remember that they bought Ninja Theory, I believe, in 2018. And Ninja Theory, we talked about this earlier in the show, but they are actually, interestingly enough, they developed a live service game shortly after they were bought out. So they were bought out in 2018. This is Tamim, who left the company shortly after the live service game launched. But they were bought out, and similar to a lot of other like ZeniMax acquisitions, they were bought out right as they were doing a live service game. And then they launched the live service game. It came out in March of 2020, was canceled less than a year later, and they abandoned it. And so Ninja Theory, this team that people think of like on the level of Naughty Dog, their last game was a catastrophically poorly received 6 out of 10 live service game that was abandoned in less than a year. So it's possible Xbox also bought them because they thought maybe there's a chance this live service game could be good and we could have a big old live service game that's super successful. That's possible that was a consideration for them and it was just a gamble that didn't pay off because the live service game flopped, but that's something you gotta think about. It's weird. Plague Tale Requiem is easily the best game on Game Pass. They should double down on those really popular modern titles. I agree. Plague Tale Requiem is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I freaking love it. Ninja Theory just released a statement about the release of Hellblade 2, but it sounds like a goodbye. Really? Hi everyone. As we sit on the eve of the release of Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, I wanted to thank you, our fans, on behalf of everyone here at Ninja Theory. We see you and we hear you when you give us such love and support, when you tell us how much Senua means to you, when you tell us how much you are looking forward to the game and how much faith you have in us to continue Senua's story in a way that does justice to the connection so many of you have to her and to Hellblade. From the very beginning of Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, we have had you in mind, and I truly hope that when you play the second chapter of Senua's story, you will find that familiar connection once again, and that also so many more people will find their way to Senua and her world too. Making video games is difficult, much like Senua. We as a team have been guided by conviction to achieve our quest to make a game that sinks you deep into Senua's world and to take you on a journey that leaves you thinking and feeling. I believe we have achieved our quest, and I hope you'll agree. I'm very proud of the game. We're very proud of our team and very proud of you, our fans, who have supported us on this magical journey. Thank you, Don Matthews, studio head. Then killer. Hope it isn't the last game you guys make. Jesus, dude. It does have a little bit of a vibe of like, we really hope you guys like it. Oh God. I don't know. We'll see. I will have lots to say tomorrow. I'm very much looking forward to it. Anyway, let's hear the rest of this. Let's see what else they have to say.
We've been waiting a while for, and I'm of the mindset for those people who have panicked about the marketing. I think it's two things, right? I do agree that Xbox is kind of just sending this thing out to die, and I don't know if it's deliberate. I don't know if it's part of the long-term plan. I only say that because Sarah Bond was wishing I don't know if you saw, but it was like Tango Gameworks, like a happy 14th birthday. And they're like, here's the many more.
Yeah,
And then 2 months later, they shut it down. I'm like, you didn't
yeah,
know by that point? Like,
that definitely showed me how sudden that was.
yeah.
Mhm.
If that they didn't know, if she was being coy, I mean, I don't know, bro. But
I suspect that Sarabon and those guys, you know, they had a good idea of what they were doing for months. You don't want to instill panic. You don't want to, like, nobody wants to run a business and like tank morale and be like, okay, guys, in like 2 months, you're all going to be fired. So Dowie, like, nobody's going to say that. They're going to wait and then they're going to do it, you know, out of nowhere. I think chances are she knew that they were going to bail and knew that this was going to be the end of it, but she was just trying to save face. It's possible technically that it was a last minute decision. We know that Microsoft executives told them that they basically needed to cut like 8% of the Xbox workforce, and that included about 1,900 jobs to achieve that. And again, if you are in Phil Spencer's position, it's actually interesting. In Phil Spencer's position, like, you can say, no, Satya, I will not fire those people. And then Satya will fire you and promote somebody else who's going to do it. Like, it will happen. They will lose their jobs. At the very least, if you do it, maybe you can make sure that minimal damage is done to the brand and to your business you've spent years building up. So for Phil, I think he was told you need to fire like 1,900 people, find the jobs and cut them. And so he looked through the portfolio and was like, I guess we'll do it here, 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 and here. And we'll cut Tango because we just don't think that games like Hi-Fi Rush are really that useful for Game Pass, and we'll just move on. It was a bad situation, but I think that's why Phil has been pretty much absent. Nobody's like seen or heard from him since all these layoffs started happening in this latest round. And I think it's because like he's not happy about it either. But funnily enough, with Tesla, there was just the recent story that broke over Elon firing the entire supercharger team, like 500 people. He just fired, including the executive in charge of the supercharger network, which, if you don't know what that is, basically the supercharger network is like one of the main reasons to buy a Tesla, because you have like built-in gas stations, but for an electric car all over the country, all over the US, and they're in Europe, is my understanding. They're all over the world. But the story came out afterwards. Apparently, the reason he impulsively, and I would argue recklessly, fired the entire supercharger team is because he told the executive, a very capable woman that was in charge of the team, he told her she needed to lay off more people in the supercharger team. And she told him, the CEO, no. She said, I've already cut jobs. I don't want to do this anymore. We're not going to do it. She tried to call his bluff, and he freaked out and fired her and every single one of her employees in return. Now, I would argue that's not what like a responsible businessman does. That's what like a petulant child who got told no does. I think that's bad. I think Elon's the kind of guy you want running a startup, but probably not like an almost $1 trillion business. I think that he is too like impulsive for that. Basically, he just quickly changes and shifts. And now he started hiring a bunch of those people back. But that's basically what will happen if somebody in the CEO chair tells you to do something as an executive and you don't do it. You're gone, and probably a lot of your team is gone too. So I understand that Phil probably had to do this because Satya was pushing him to do it and the budgets just required it, but it doesn't mean that firing Tango was a good optical move. And that's where I'm at, where I think firing Tango might have made sense on a spreadsheet, but I think optically and in terms of morale within Xbox as a company and as a platform, firing Tango and closing Tango was a huge tactical blunder. And I think they just totally blew it. So it's a whole thing. Anyway, let's hear the rest of what they have to say.
yeah, with Hellblade 2, you just wonder if it's getting marched out to its death. I agree with that kind of consensus, but I also think the problem with Hellblade 2 is we all learned how short this game was just this year. And when you look at it objectively, you get the reveal alongside the Series X, which I think sent a completely different message from what Xbox thought it was going to send, right? Which was like, this is going to be a big one. We might launch with this thing. This thing's coming sooner. Well, here we are 4 years into the generation, and now it's coming. So that was kind of a mixed message. And I only say that because we learned with like Redfall how astonished Xbox was. Wait, that failure is attached to us and not Bethesda? So, you know, I'm going to say that they probably didn't anticipate the attachment to Hellblade in their console to be a significant thing, but it is. You get a trailer later on. I'm trying to recount the details because we've got 4 trailers.
Yeah.
We got the gameplay reveal at the Game Awards.
Yes.
Then we got this, what they call the Senua trailer, which was a cutscene at the showcase for Xbox.
Which was atrocious. That's the one where she's like talking into a puddle and stuff. And like, it's like I said at the time, I loved the first game, but I thought that trailer was laughably horrible. Because like all trailers should communicate something to the audience, right? Like, what is the point of this trailer? This trailer is meant to get you hooked into the world, make you understand what we're trying to do and the broad vision. The next trailer is going to be the gameplay trailer. We're going to show you what you'll actually be doing during the game, flex some systems, and show you how good it all works and how well it works in motion. Like, each trailer should achieve something. That trailer achieved nothing. People tuned out what she was even saying. They had no idea what it was in the context of the story, what was going on. And it also wasn't particularly visually impressive because it's just her in a cave talking to herself in a puddle. Like, across the board, it didn't achieve anything. It was just weird. It was just odd. And how that got greenlit, I don't know. That was a weird trailer. And I was like, guys, I'm fighting for you. I want this to be good, but that was a weird choice. Really weird choice.
That was really weird. And then no release window or anything. That was one of the rare blemishes on that excellent showcase.
Agreed.
Then at the end of just last year, you get the Game Awards, another showing of Hellblade 2. But this time it's like a full trailer, pretty epic. You get a release window. It's like 2024. Then you get a developer direct. And you see the game again, and you get a release date. So,
and we also only get like repeated slices of it. We get clips or dev interviews and stuff. And they say weird things like, yeah, we've totally rebuilt the combat. And then they transition to another shot of so, yeah, they just don't talk about it. It's like people were, they were frustrated with the first game with the combat. They thought it was too simple. And we've reworked a lot of it. So we're really, coming out swinging. Anyway, and they just don't follow through it. It's just really weird. I think without a doubt, the consensus is that they showed off this game too early. I think everybody agrees on that. But whenever a game is shown off really early in the generation, or even in this case, before the generation, because you remember they did that whole like in-engine demo to showcase the power of the Series X. So this was like, as long as the Series X has been in the public consciousness, this game has been around and in our thoughts as like, this is going to frame it. This is going to utilize it and push it to the max. For it to take this long and for us to finally be getting it, and then for the perception to be that Xbox doesn't even necessarily believe in it, that's the biggest problem. And that's where I'm at, where even if Xbox really thinks, maybe their internal reviews are like, oh no, this is like a 10 out of 10 on our internal review scale. We're just going to do a different marketing style for it. That's all. That could be the case. But the perception for regular everyday gamers is that Xbox doesn't believe in this enough to market it. That's the perception. And it's going to be really hard for them to shake it, I think. Again, it'll need some 10 out of 10 reviews to shake it, I think.
I'm of the mindset that they kind of shot the load too early, because now they're in this spot of,
shout out Maddie shooting the load. Cheers.
Oh, this is an 8-hour game. We don't have much new stuff we can show for this that's going to hype people up that we're going to be comfortable showing. At a certain point, with a game so tight and so small, and what seems to be many long walking segments, you can only show so much before you've revealed the whole game.
That's what Joe Raptor said. I don't know if it was on the podcast or before the podcast or something, but I was asking him, I was like, why don't you think that they've shown like more trailers or something? Like, they're really absent. This is odd. And he was like, well, dude, because if they show any more, they're just going to show the whole game. And that's technically true. Like, it's technically true. So we did this little calculation on stream the other day where we were like, okay, so 60 minutes in an hour. And then I don't typically believe, like, typically when game directors say that a game is like 30 hours, it's actually like 25, or it's usually a good bit less. So even if we say like 7 hours, okay, 420, dab. That like 6-minute gameplay trailer they did is like a solid 1.5% of the total runtime. Like, we got a problem. Let's hear what else I have to say about Hellblade.
Seeing too much of this, maybe not Deathloop level seeing too much of this, but many people, myself included, read this game wrong. As I've said before, I thought this was going to be a God of War moment in that, oh, this game's going to be bigger and more epic, like Ninja Theory's about to cook.
I agree. I thought that too. I thought there's no way that they would showcase this game as the centerpiece of the Series X. This is the game that justifies that console existing. This is what showcases the power. Preach, brethren. I thought there's no way they do that. And then it ends up being like just as short or shorter than the first game. And it's like not really changing anything mechanically. It's the same combat. It's the same puzzles. Like I was like, there's no way that they just don't do anything with it. But color me surprised as well.
Learning it was 8 hours flipped my whole entire perspective of the game. The Naughty Dog comparisons I made, like flipped it all upside down. Because I was like, oh, this hasn't just been like cooking for years and you guys are building it. This is like a 8-hour game. It could still be amazing, by the way. But it went from, wow, we've seen nothing yet to we've seen so much.
That's a good way of phrasing it. It's like, okay, yeah, just wait till they do the trailers. It's going to blow us away. And then you realize it's that short and you're like, honestly, it's probably shorter. Like when all is said and done. Because again, I never believe, unless you're Hidetaka Miyazaki, never believe a game director when they tell you how long their game is. They always overinflate it. Always, like without exception. It's hilarious when they phrase it. Like Todd Howard, yeah, Skyrim has infinite quest lines and it has well over 500 hours of combat encounters. You're like, come on, dude, come on. You sure about that? You know, never believe anybody. But he's right. When that is revealed, it totally changes it, totally reframes it. And you're like, okay, that one trailer I watched is like a pretty significant chunk of the total gameplay time. You're like, oh crap, oh no.
And I think they're hesitant to show more. At the same time, I think it benefits Xbox with their future plans that if Starfield couldn't move the needle, can Hellblade 2 really move the needle?
No
As
way.
I said last week, I don't think so. I hope this concern people have does turn out into a strong player base that buys the game. But we're seeing what Game Pass has done to people not buying games. And so I'm concerned, Cog. I am. We already know this is a PS5 port candidate. But when it comes to my concern, it has nothing to do with the quality of the game. I think Ninja Theory, they did that. I trust them on that front. I think they're going to deliver something great. I hope it's just not full of too many walking segments and too many puzzles.
Yeah.
That, the verdict's to be decided on that. We'll see. But this is an important one, man. It reminds me, my final point, I'll kick it to you, reminds me a ton of last year.
Yes.
Redfall came out.
Yes.
Redfall was a disaster. Oh, this showcase better be good. And what's going on with Starfield? Because now I'm worried.
Yep.
At that point, we had a little more trust in Xbox. So when we saw the long developer direct and the slate, it was like, okay, we're good. And for you and I, at least, Starfield delivered in most areas where we were like, okay, we're pretty happy with that. Now it's a different ball game. You've dramatically shifted your business once more.
Yep.
Now the pressure's on Hellblade. Oh, this better be good.
Be hot, bro.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Is like right now, I feel like most Xbox gamers and fans are looking for they're looking for Hellblade not just to be pretty good, but they're looking for it to make up for the shortcomings of the last year or two, right? Like this game needs to make up for the lack of graphical fidelity in Starfield. It needs to make up for the lack of polish in Redfall. Like people are looking for it to make up all of that. You could say, like Whitest Rabbit in YouTube chat, the bar is really low. I think that's what maybe Microsoft and Xbox are hoping for, is that they're hoping, well, the bar's just been lowered. So if we come in here, we're actually above where they expected. So it could be a 6 out of a 10 or a 7 out of 10, but at least it's not as bad as Redfall. But that's not how that works, especially when Hellblade has been like pushing it. Xbox has been pushing this game very hard for a while. And then right as we get to like 6 months before launch, all of a sudden there's no marketing at all until the week before launch. And it gives the impression that maybe as they got close to launch, they did internal reviews and maybe those internal reviews weren't where they wanted them to be. And so instead of pushing the marketing really hard, they walked off and they were like, okay, we'll just let it kind of come out and do what we're going to do and see where it's at. That very well could be what it is. Or it could be a new marketing strategy too. It could be that their internal reviews are all 10s out of 10s and they're like, oh, this is going to be the best game of the year. It's going to win game of the year. It's going to be amazing. That could be the case. It could be, but it's all weird. It's all very weird. honestly. Matt, thank you for the 3 months. The problem with letting your studios do whatever they want, is that you have a game that does... You never have a game that does what you need when you need it. Yeah, I think that that's true. I think they also, Xbox has been, when they bought all these studios, we know for a fact that they tried to take a quote unquote hands-off approach. Their goal was to buy a studio like Bethesda Softworks or a group of studios like ZeniMax, and then go in and let Arcane Austin do what they wanted to do. And they wanted to do that because they thought creative freedom was going to carry the day. And I think they just didn't really realize how many studios were making games specifically to appeal to a Microsoft buyout and to boost the potential buyout price that weren't being made with the most passion, that weren't being made and weren't going to be successful. Because again, like you look at something like Arcane Austin, part of the reason that the price was boosted was because, you know, they were doing at the time, Fallout 76 was coming out, was a live service game to boost revenues. They were working on Redfall, which was a live service game supposed to boost revenues. There were all of these live service games that were supposed to boost revenues when they were bought out. And that was because ZeniMax leadership knew that if there was the potential for all this cash to come in, they'd get paid out even higher than if there were these low grossing projects coming out. And it seems like maybe something similar happened with Ninja Theory, where they were bought out in 2018. And then 2 years later, they release I already forgot the name of it. They released their live service game, Bleeding Edge, which releases to like 6 out of 10 reviews and is abandoned a year later. Like, again, this is the same studio that's doing Hellblade 2. And it's a studio that's only like 80 people in total. Like, it's a small team. And they put this together and had to abandon it just 3 years ago. Because it was a year after this that they shut it down and abandoned it. So I think they were bought with the expectation they were going to make a big, successful Overwatch competitor, and then it flopped. And they're like, okay, well, maybe like you did that trailer for Hellblade, so let's get Hellblade 2 out the door and make that amazing. But it's a lot easier said than done, you know. Never heard of it? Exactly. Thank you for demonstrating the point. Thank you. That's precisely the problem. Yeah. We have all never heard of it. Yep. And that's why it was abandoned. Yep. Sure was. Let's hear what Maddie's co-host has to say about all of this, because it's very interesting. This is Lord Cognito is his co-host, in case you're not familiar with Maddie's podcast and everything.
And I think it's going to be a good game, but it's not getting the attention it deserves. And this stems back to a tweet Xbox posted where it just said Hellblade 2, May 21st. No links, no nothing. And people were like, oh my God, they fired the marketing department too. Which was, yeah, I mean, the industry was on them for that one. So hopefully this lack of marketing produces something where fans really champion the game if it's good. But Cog, gut check on Hellblade 2.
Yo.
How are we feeling about this one right now as we record this a week away from the game?
And to be clear, so if they recorded this a week ago, I'm guessing, I don't know if Maddie has review code or not, but I think that was before review codes went out. So I think, you know, there's no coded messaging or anything. He's just being upfront. He's hoping the game is good, thinks it probably will be good, but it's fighting an uphill battle because of the lack of support. But again, the thing to remember is that this is an Xbox podcast. It's called Defining Duke. Like, these guys cover Xbox stuff specifically. They are rooting for them to be successful, and this is the morale for them. You know, like, even for them, they're like, Yeah,
we're getting close. We are very close.
Yeah.
I think you eloquated your points really well. I think that, you know, not to just double down on everything you just said, but I do feel that the initial feel of this game I had similarly, in the sense that, man, I did think it was going to be like this big, you know, 15, 20 hour thing or whatever. And, you know, it's massive kind of game, you know, and then we did learn, no, we're still kind of retaining the spirit of Ninja Theory, and it's kind of like indie boutique, but like this very high fidelity game, right? Now, on the record, I don't have a problem with the game length being, you know, 7-8 hours or whatever it is, because I do have open world fatigue and I do have, you know, 40+ hour game fatigue. As long as you tell a fantastic story And for a person who played the first game, loved the first game, beat the first game, this is one of the more unique games in its genre. Now, when we get down to getting close to release and the marketing, the thing that also surprised me was they seemed to set expectation with price. They were like, hey, this is not $70. This is $50, right? I'm like, okay, cool. All right. So, and then we got a shorter, that's when we learned that it was going to be a shorter experience.
I do get the vibe they're trying to realign expectations. And that's what worries me. Because again, I think at the start of this generation, they were expecting this to be like their Naughty Dog competitor. And since we've gotten closer to launch, it seems like they've tried to reframe and reposition. And so the vibe is that things have changed. Maybe not. Again, it could just be all of this is like we're seeing shadows that aren't there, and we're so cynical towards Xbox, and we just assume they're going to screw up. So we just look at all this stuff. Maybe that's what it is. Could, to play devil's advocate, that very well could be all it is.
So I guess for me, back to the marketing thing, I am seeing the marketing obviously now. Obviously, you talked about that, was it Max or whatever it is that you saw, whatever. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we saw Greedy's tweet in reference to, we're marketing this. I thought it was kind of funny that we got to put out a tweet to say that we're going to do this. Okay, but cool.
It's just, I can't, bro. It's just so unbelievable.
It's very strange to me. And I'm going to be honest.
Imagine PlayStation be like, all right, yo, we bought Insomniac, and guess what? We got a viral marketing campaign planned for Spider-Man. It's like, yeah. Bought the studio, man. Like
it's to be expected, right?
Yeah.
I agree. That's what we think should happen. But I'm gonna be real with you. This is what I'm just gonna assume what's going on. I try to make sense of things that don't make sense to me. And one of the things that don't make sense to me is why we have to announce these kind of things. So I'm going to assume that you really don't have the marketing budget allocated to promote the way you want to promote. And maybe you get a chance now to promote something finally. Because let's be honest, Xbox marketing has been non-existent for a lot of the big titles minus Starfield. Yeah. Minus Starfield, whenever they have a major release, we don't really see all of that. And
I would argue I saw Redfall everywhere. I saw trailers at the gym. I saw trailers like in the airport. It was everywhere. It was freaking everywhere. Same with Starfield. Starfield was everywhere. So they have the capability of doing it. It just seems that they are selective with when they push it. And it could be like you mentioned, maybe it's a budgetary thing. That could be the case. But I think with all this, it's Occam's razor that we have to use to figure out what's going on. Because usually the answer that requires the least assumptions or the least variables, the lowest number of variables, is usually the correct one. So is it likely that maybe the budgets are just low? It's possible. Maybe their internal metrics say that this game is phenomenal, but their budgets are low, so they're going to wait to do the marketing until closer to launch. That could be the case. Or it could just be that they maybe don't want to spend a ton of money on marketing because they're not expecting it to could either convert to signups, or they don't expect the game to be received that well. There could be any other number of reasons for it. But either way, I think the perception is that something's off. Something's weird. It's just the perception is something's off. And again, perception's reality. So even if the game is phenomenal, people have the impression that something's wrong, and Xbox has got to shake that. And maybe the way they shake it is when reviews go up for the game and it's nothing but 10 out of 10s, maybe that's what it does.
I think this comes from up top in the sense of corporations tend to say, you know what? We spend all this money, look, millions of dollars. Like, for example, we talked about Suicide Squad and all this stuff, like millions of dollars, billboards and all that stuff. And if the game flop, companies are now risk adverse to that. And they're more like, well, social media marketing and content creators and evangelical, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's interesting. Ben pointed out something funny in our staff chat, which was that like Sea of Thieves is getting a ton of like integration and sponsored videos. Xbox will never fucking pay us for anything because we talk about all their shit anyway. So like they don't need to waste the money ever, nor will we take it. But I think it was interesting is like Hellblade isn't getting any sort of sponsored promotion either from our knowledge thus far. And I find that to be the most interesting aspect is like Sea of Thieves is getting priority in the marketing budget, it would seem, from an anecdotal level.
But again, when we talk about KPIs, to bring it all back to there, With KPIs, Sea of Thieves is like a dream maker. Like Sea of Thieves is what checks off all of those boxes. People come in, people are getting it and buying it on PlayStation, buying an Xbox game on PlayStation just to try it because it's so unique and so interesting. And they're spending money on that game. They're buying, you know, whatever cosmetics and stuff. And they're playing that game for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Certainly more hours than Hellblade will offer, even according to the director. So for Xbox and Game Pass in general, Sea of Thieves is like exactly what they want. Hellblade is not what they want. Like Hellblade doesn't work like that. I think with all of it, it's really, really interesting to look at the broader picture of Xbox, because they're trying to, and it's the confusing thing about their strategy right now is that they're trying to do two things. They're trying to do the live service thing that brings people to the platform, keeps them on the platform, keeps them playing on the platform for years and years and years. But then they also want to have studios like a BGS or a Ninja Theory or a Machine Works or Machine Games. That's what it is, Machine Games. They want to have studios like that are doing these tentpole single player adventure games that are a little shorter, but then they also need the live service games, the Call of Duties, the Diablos and things to keep people coming back and subscribed for long periods of time. And right now it just seems like those are two different things, two totally different things. It's not clear how those line up and how those pieces of the puzzle click together. Because right now it just seems like they are actively fighting each other. And again, it's why optically the layoffs at Tango Gameworks was just so catastrophic for public perception, because it gave the impression to everybody that even if you are that studio that makes the best single player game in terms of reviews that you put out that year, you can still be shut down. You know, it just causes all sorts of problems that I don't think they really, really considered. So that's absolutely the case. Yeah, Bryn World, I unfortunately, but understandably, can't talk about any specifics of the game, anything about the game. My review will go up when the reviews are allowed to go up. That will happen. And as always, because I struggle with brevity, I will no doubt have a lot to say, because even when there's not much to say, I still somehow find a lot to say about it. But like this whole segment that we're doing started because somebody in chat was like, Luke, did you hear that Maddie mentioned when he was riding on his Peloton that he got an ad for Hellblade? And then we've turned this into however long this segment has been. So I struggle with brevity, no doubt. But when the review embargo lifts, I will talk about the game and we'll have a review and everything up, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But some people are saying, oh, they don't need to market it because it'll sell well by itself since it's niche. So maybe if it's a good game, you're going to choose to go like no marketing, right? If it's a bad game, you also aren't going to want to market it. But then again, we have lots of stories and cases of good games or bad games that get marketed, like Suicide Squad, because they're trying to gin up some sort of interest to maybe make some money back. So even then you could say that maybe it is in fact marketed. Maybe they do market it if it's a bad game. And then if it's, you know, it's not clear, because any number one of these boxes you could check and it could be explained away and you could justify it. It's like, yeah, the game's bad, but we want to market it because we think that it has potential and we want people to try it who might not otherwise. So it's just, it's just speculation. At the end of the day, it's just speculation.
And that's a good call, because to me, what it shows, it indicates to me, Sea of Thieves, live service, cooperative game, that is something that the brass would more feel comfortable with as a good investment. Whereas a single player experience where there's no monetization in Hellblade, there's no, things you really can do. It's a story, start to end, finite, done, right? That's why I think the expectation went down on price, and I think they're pricing that accordingly. Now, to your overall point, where I have to agree with you on this, the problem with them coming into a situation where you just removed, shuttered, and shut down Tango Studios is what we talked about last Def Highland Dude, is every smaller studio is now going to feel on notice if they don't deliver. Now, as far as everyone's point about, I feel like this is going out to die, we will see. I will say this. The thing that's unfortunate is the Hi-Fi Rush situation, because it showed that if it's critically acclaimed, that don't necessarily mean you safe, right? What I need to know...
Even engagement, if they're just seeking it for particular titles, doesn't matter.
Exactly. So what I need to know is, was the Tango situation a one-off because ZeniMax was told, hey, you've got to trim the fat. You're not getting any more money to do anything else you want to do. Sorry, I know you may want to have more Fallout games, and we want you to have that too. But if you want that money, guess what you're going to have to do? You're going to have to make the tough call and get back to us as far as that. And we all said, we kind of understand Alpha Dog, right? We kind of understand Arcane Austin. We kind of understand Rouse to an extent. Not that we are championing layoffs and shuttering studios.
There's reasoning that you can attach to it.
But with Tango, we like not them.
Yeah.
Got them. They did what they were supposed to do. You said these games could stay alongside the bigger titles, and you said Game Pass was the vision that this could coexist. So now that it's clearly a change, right? There is at least we have an evidence point to say, okay, you make something critically acclaimed, that don't necessarily mean you staying. Now, the compulsions, the Ninja Theory, we got to look at it. And in Ninja Theory, they did not knock it out the park with Bleeding Edge the first time. We got to be clear. I interviewed, I forgot the beautiful lady's name. Oh, man, I forgot. She was so awesome. Unfortunately, the game did not do well. So we know they have Project Mara as well. I believe there's another psychological thing. I will say this. My thought, I have no insight.
I will say at the outset, or just before he finishes that, I mean, I think he's absolutely right. There's things, my understanding, and this is something after reading some more articles and interviews with Sarah Bond and executives at Xbox and Microsoft, because after the layoffs, a lot of investors, through all sorts of different platforms, whether it's Bloomberg, CNBC, whoever, they started asking Microsoft spokespeople and people about the choice for Tango Gameworks specifically to be laid off. And one of the things that was kind of like a common thread through a lot of them is they mentioned that Tango Gameworks was in Japan and that they wanted to make sure that they could, ZeniMax specifically, could easily manage all of the studios under their roof, which gave me the impression that one of the reasons they might have laid off Tango Gameworks was specifically because it would be tough to manage a company on the other side of the world. So they were like, let's just lay them off, even though they do great stuff. Let's just lay them off, shut down that studio, and we'll go elsewhere and we'll put money elsewhere. I think it's still stupid. I think they could have sold that studio for a lot of money. I think they could have done any number of things to make that work. And granted, I've never run an international game development publisher or studio, so take it with a grain of salt. But I cannot imagine that in 2024, it's so difficult to manage that you have to just shut it all down. Like, I can't fathom that that's the case. So Xbox is racist? No, not racist. I think specifically, we heard like Jim Ryan complaining about having to fly back and forth between Japan and the UK, where he lives and primarily works. And he complained about that. He said that's one of the reasons he was pushed to retire. And so I'm sure it's tough to be an executive at ZeniMax trying to juggle all of the stuff Bethesda Softworks is doing and then also one studio off in Japan. I'm sure it's a headache, but like, is that headache worth shuttering the studio that made your best game? I don't think so. I don't think that makes sense, but that's one common thread we've seen with a lot of these interviews, is that they bring up the ease of managing the studios under their umbrella, and that, Tango Gameworks being in Japan, that was something to consider, blah, blah, blah. It's dumb, but I think a lot of people are trying to search for a reason for why Tango Gameworks was shuttered. And from what I've seen, it seems quite possible that it was something as stupid as that it was something as stupid as we just don't want to have to fly that much, or it's too much of a headache every time we do a conference call to have the translators there and do all of that. Like, it'll be easier if we just do it this way. Like, it's dumb, but it very well could be the case. It's especially dumb when you factor in that Microsoft is an international company themselves. But the problem is that ZeniMax, who would be the ones managing Tango, they apparently didn't like having to juggle it.
Information, I'm just guessing. My thought process is clearly the vision from 2018 to now has changed at some point.
Yeah.
We've already deduced that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So my question is, and this is what we need to find out, with Xbox Game Studios, because this is different from ZeniMax, does that apply to them? Do they have protections? Right? Because I remember interviews with Obsidian and Fergus Marquardt saying, hey, we did our due diligence. We wasn't even sure to sign with you guys. We asked around. Are there contractual protections to say, hey, if this doesn't work out, we ain't completely shuttered? You know what I'm saying? Whereas Tango and their situation may have been different. And in fairness to Xbox, we have to also say Shinji did leave before that, right? We don't know what the structure, they're a remote studio. We don't know the structure in there. Because one thing I have found out, and it has been prevalent with Xbox Game Studios, is if you're working on something, and even if when you're not working on something, a game release, they want you helping out with the other. We've heard about stories, Coalition helping this team and this one helping. They want you doing other secondary and tertiary responsibilities. So I don't know if Tango could accommodate that based on their situation, because it is clear as day. Even though Microsoft is guilty and the plan is guilty, yes, they get all the smoke. ZeniMax made the call and said, we going to jettison them. We
Exactly. And, you know, if Phil gets his orders from Satya and Satya's like, you need to get rid of 1,900 jobs. And then Phil's like, okay, well, 600 of them are going to have to get cut from ZeniMax's staff. So ZeniMax got to find 600 jobs, or they got to find 200 jobs, whatever their portion was. And then they pass it off and they're like, okay, you figure out who you're going to fire, ZeniMax executives. And they chose Tango because they just didn't want to have to juggle it. Like, you look at it, I think if we look at the ZeniMax corporate chart. So of this chart, you can see Arcane Austin, basically, you know, half of Arcane cut and gone. Of these other, Tango, gone. Alpha Dog, gone. Roundhouse, gone. And if you look at the remaining companies, they're all working on stuff that we would probably say has a lot of potential, right? So you'd say, oh, Arcane Lyon, they're working on the big Blade game, and that is a very expensive thing. They're partnering with like Marvel on it, so that's not something you can just cancel. So yeah, they got to stay. Machine Games, they're doing the big Indiana Jones game. Big contracts with Disney. They've got all sorts of limitations on that. They have to stay, and that game has potential, so we can't cancel anything there. ZeniMax Online, they run online live service stuff that makes good money, and they're also hiring like crazy because they're working on another unannounced game that might be announced this summer. We don't know, but they're working on something big that they think has a lot of potential, which is why they've been hiring so much. So we can't cut any jobs there. BGS, they're the darling child. They can do no wrong, even though they constantly do wrong. So they're safe. Doom, also always well received, makes good money, so it is safe. Tango, they made Hi-Fi Rush, but the executives, the guys we think really made that studio great, he just left. Some other people left. And the game they made, while well reviewed, was not like, you know, it wasn't game of the year, and it didn't make a lot of money. And it wasn't like driving many signups. So maybe we get rid of them and Alpha and Roundhouse. So like if you're the executive and you're looking at this slate and you're told you got to get rid of 200 jobs or 300 jobs, 400 jobs, I think it makes sense why they did it the way they did it. I just think that they didn't really factor in how devastating it would be optically to fire Tango. I think that's the problem. With all this said, I mean, it's bringing us all the way back to Hellblade, which was where all of this started. I think Hellblade has a lot riding on it. There's a lot of pressure on them to perform. Xbox needs a W real bad, but the game that Hellblade, as it's been openly advertised as of right now, the game director says it's about 8 hours. It's a linear narrative game. It's very niche. It's artsy. It's artsy fartsy. I was going to be like, it's artsy and it's fartsy. What does fartsy mean? But it is maybe not the type of game that would have been ideal to release around now. The type of game that would be ideal to release around now is maybe like the Indiana Jones game. I think if that game came out and was like really well reviewed and really well received and, you know, got mass media attention and people, you know, outside of the gaming industry were hearing about it. That's what Xbox needs right now. I think this game is maybe not the ideal release for this time period, but we'll find out tomorrow. He took my thing.